Good morning. Welcome to our first edition of Between Two Ellens, hosted at the Capitol. So I'm going to have Ellen kind of take over and introduce our guests.
Yes, definitely. I'm very excited that both of you decided to come here because we're now on the floor and there's so many things that go on, and I know that I've forgotten some things that we're supposed to be doing because of this book. It's called The Rules, and every session we get either some new ones or some changed. And today we have our parliamentarian, CJ. CJ, if you could introduce yourself, just tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. My name is CJ Cavin. I'm the chief parliamentarian. I've been in this role. This is my 9th regular session. Been doing this a few years now. It's sort of hard to believe that I've been doing this so long. My background, I'm an attorney. I'm also a professional parliamentarian as well. There's only a handful of credentialed parliamentarians in Oklahoma. There's only a handful across the country. And one of the things that I'm blessed to do is use those sort of unique skills that very few other people really care about, and use those to hopefully make our process better, easier to understand, which is ultimately, I think, good for our members and for the public.
Well, we're very happy to have you here, and we're, I guess, now lucky to have you in the House. So thank you for coming.
Do I recall correctly that you got your license to practice while you were serving as the parliamentarian, or at least you were in school or something?
Yeah. So when I was first hired, and I started in January of 2018, I was already a credentialed parliamentarian, finishing up law school at Oklahoma City University when they had a part-time night program. So we would be on the floor for all day, and then I go to class at night, which was awful. 10 out of 10, don't recommend that. But I took the bar in February of 2020 and had to miss a few days of session to do that. And so obviously a few months later, I found out I passed the bar at home because we were at home because of the pandemic. Normally, new attorneys get sworn in on the floor of the House, and that wasn't possible that year. Everyone got sworn in.
What a bummer!
It's okay. I had a key.
Okay.
And so I actually brought my laptop and set it up in the chamber, and still got sworn in the chamber, even though I was the only one.
I think it's extraordinary and speaks volumes about you that you were able to both serve as a parliamentarian and get your law degree.
You grew up in the House.
Yes.
Well, that's awesome.
Sleep is not something I've prioritized my entire life.
Well, then you're in the right job.
Yeah.
And of course, have to introduce our rule expert in the minority, Representative Andy Fugate. Could you tell us a little bit about your history, and especially about why we both thought it was very important that you were here to talk about rules?
Well, thank you. I'm Andy Fugate. I represent House District 94, which is Del City and the surrounding community that everybody else calls Southeast Oklahoma City. I refer to that as the suburbs of Del City because that's the way Oklahoma City treats us. This is now my 8th session in the legislature. I serve today as the floor leader for the House Democrats, which does mean that I'm probably the person who pays the most attention to the rules on our side of the aisle, oftentimes sending questions over to CJ behind the scenes. I spent 30 plus years working with high school kids as a volunteer up here at the Capitol, teaching the process. And so I came in with at least a decent understanding of the rules and framework, and have tried my best to flesh it out in the time since. So every day I learn there's a new rule.
Well, it's somewhat that we call it a supermajority that we have, but I think that we should call it a super minority, especially when we talk about rules, because that's the only way, and I'm sure you would say, how we can really have some sort of control if you know the rules on the floor. Would you agree?
It's certainly a tool in the tool chest to make sure that we are abiding by the rules. But there are a variety of ways that we can influence what goes on. I know because you work behind the scenes so much with other members on legislation. I just got out of a hearing, a personal conversation, not a public hearing, with a committee chair discussing one of my bills, and that's often how this building works. The rules, sometimes you can use them as a bludgeon Oftentimes more, they're frankly a constraint on all of us to try to make sure that we don't get off in the weeds.
There are some ways that we can use the rules to slow down the process, or maybe get a little more time questions. Knowing the rules helps us. Would you agree on that?
No, absolutely, yeah.
And I would say if you haven't ever come up to the Capitol, which you should, I think one of the most overwhelming things when you start as a new member is that understanding the rule process and what that allows for how conversations happen, how questions happen, how debate happens. All of that is done through our rule-making process. And so as a new member, it feels very structured, and it allows you to kind of easily understand the process as it's designed. That being said, the book is so thick, the rules can be very complicated as far as when bills are introduced and amendments and times like that.
Well, and the hardest part is on day one after your election, the first thing you do in here essentially is come in on organization day and agree that you're going to abide by these rules that you just got a copy of and you're still trying to figure out. And it's first one of those decisions where you're looking at it going, I don't know, is this the right thing or not?
Yeah.
So from your perspective on the rules, I know that there are things that we forget on the floor that you're very good to remind us when we do forget. But tell us some of those rules that you find maybe that we break but don't necessarily mean to, or give us an example of a rule that is definitely followed because of something that happened before. I don't know. Give us a little story about that.
So I don't know that I would sort of break our rules into two different categories, but at least for this conversation, I think there's rules about process and there's rules about respect, rules about decorum. And so many of the rules about process, which is our deadlines, our bill filing, the process that bill must go through in order to become law. Some of that's constitutional, some of that's based off our rules. We're pretty strict on those. We're pretty, the last thing we want is an argument or somebody to come up and say later, you didn't do this process right on this bill, so we've got a problem. That's where we get our sort of germaneness rules. Our amendments have to be related to the introduced version of the bill. Those are some of those process type rules. And then I think we have our respect rules, our decorum rules. And some of those are, dress code, food, referencing people in debate or in the gallery.
Yep.
Those types of things are tobacco on the floor, alcohol. I know that's a hot topic these days in the building. Those are the types of rules that are less about the process and more about conduct. And the conduct rules, those are pretty historical. Many of our rules sort of date back to British Parliament. That's where all sort of parliamentary procedure in America comes from, although we've had our own twists with that. So our conduct rules are, if somebody passes between two members talking on the floor, that's technically a rule violation. And we don't always highlight that. We don't always call that out. Sometimes that may be a conversation with, members of leadership, or I may go to a member. The rule that I, have to enforce the most is the no canned beverages rule. And the fun fact about that is, I don't care if you have a Coke Zero can,
Mountain Dew,
Mountain Dew, whatever it is. It has nothing to do with that. It's the sound it makes when you open it. Or a bottled beverage. That's the other part of that rule. It's the sound it makes when you open it. Because that's not only distraction, but it's also, it's really hard to manage the sound in a room like that. And so when we've got microphones and things like that, that carries much louder than we think it does.
I didn't know that.
Well, it's funny, I got caught last year by you eating on the floor, and it was because you came up to me, and you can watch our procedures live, and so you forget that the person in front of you is speaking, but the camera's on them and you're behind them, and I'm just plopping in some food. And CJ came up to me and said, "You can't eat." And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And he was like, "And you definitely can't eat on camera." Like double caught, Ellen, you know, and I took it outside. But I do think one of the things I do like is the quorum between members when you are disagreeing. So I can't call out Hefner or Fugate by name. Instead, you call them out by their community.
Their county, their
county,
area.
I mean,
yeah.
you can in questions,
Yeah.
Yes.
but yeah, during debate, no.
Yeah.
Right.
I also like it in debate that you have to address the chair,
Yeah.
so that you're not, a lot of, that seems to be one that members forget, you know, that they're talking around to everyone with that microphone in the hand, and, you know, it depends on if the chair's paying attention, and I know you've got a lot going on too with debate, but it's usually another member that goes, and he's not here anymore, and actually we're in his old office that used to always tell us, "Can someone say that about the chair? You know, look at the chair," you know. So sometimes there's other people that pick up on those rules, depending on the heatedness of the conversation, that call that out as well. But it does, basically, the decorum is, it is generally, we don't have a lot of problems because of the rules.
Would it be fair to characterize decorum? I think of them kind of two ways. One is to help us with our relationships with each other. And I think that's really important in a building that runs off a relationship. But the other then is just, and I don't want this to come across as defending the snootiness of the institution. That's not the right. But it is really about this institution being sacrosanct, and none of us should be doing something to diminish the institution itself.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the other thing I think I would say, normally when I describe decorum, you know, I'm normally talking about it in a Roberts context, a Roberts Rules context. So for me, it's an 1876 word that means respect. Because Roberts was first published in 1876. Not the point, but you'll get some history too. And for me, that I think what our rules expect, what decorum expects, and I think what we should all expect is just to be treated with a certain level of respect. Now, buildings with domes are notorious for passion, heated emotions. You know, there's no doubt that y'all are going to disagree about some issues. That's healthy. That's part of the process. Actually, it's what makes bills better. Is that disagreement, but doing it in a way where we can disagree, but we can still be respectful. And for many, you know, on both sides of the aisle, you know, many people are friends. I mean.
Something I learned from you early on in Roberts versus Masons, which is what we use. It's not just respect for that individual who's speaking, but it's respect for the 40,000 people they represent.
Right.
That's right.
And ultimately for the, you know, roughly 4 million people that y'all collectively represent.
Correct.
And that's a good point as well. You know, part of our rules in most organizations that have a parliamentary procedure, it's about protecting the rights of the members. And our rules certainly do that. That's at least their goal. But we have sort of that dual purpose of we've got to protect the rights of our members. We also have to protect the rights of the public as well. And you know, that's why, for example, when our live feed goes down, there's nothing that says we have to broadcast. There's no rule, there's no statute, there's nothing that says that. But when our live feed goes down, we stop the floor. We don't proceed until that's fixed. There's no rule that says we have to do that. But obviously we have the expectation to our members, but we also have the expectations to each of your 40,000-ish constituents as well. That's where sort of the dynamic is of we got to provide services and expectations for the members, but also for the people that elected them too.
Yeah.
There's differences between both sides of the Capitol on rules. One is that you know, we only get one question and a follow-up when it comes to questions. That usually is something that they ask for. It's different from the other side where they get more time to debate, more time to ask questions. I've heard from the member who's not here as well that talks about living rent-free in members' heads because some of the rules were changed. Maybe Andy or CJ, you could talk a little bit more about that as well.
So I would say two things. One, when it comes to questions and floor management, most bills don't start off as one question, one follow-up. There's generally quite a bit of grace and leeway. The challenge becomes is, you know, and at least in our software, we see, there's 15 members who want to ask questions. Part of it is ensuring that every member gets the opportunity to ask a question, before we sort of, the members are like, okay, I'm just ready to vote now. So part of it is that floor management of, is everyone being heard, and at least getting their questions answered. So that's the first part of that, as far as the debate goes.
It's not a hard and fast rule. It is something that the floor leader or you can bring up to. Is that who makes the call?
Ultimately, it's whoever's in the chair,
Okay.
whoever the presiding officer is, and at the end of the day, it's about reading the room. Where we sit. Where I sit next to the presiding officer, where we sit, we can see everybody. We can see the conversations and the dynamics. And we can see when members are interested in the conversation and, quite frankly, when they're not.
And they're checked out.
But again, it's about being fair and doing that type of work. Now, one of the main differences between, this side of the Capitol and the other side of the Capitol is I've got more than double the members that they do. I mean,
And we're all awake.
I won't comment on that. So we have double the members, which means we have almost always more than double the bills, double the process, double the problems sometimes, although not this year. So that's part of that dynamic is just floor management. With 101 members versus 48. Most of them, our members are fairly engaged most of the time. Those are all things that we've got to balance.
So when you were studying the rules, how do you work through the process and knowing, because to me it still seems overwhelming, other than the dates and deadlines, but when you kind of dig into the House rules, did you have any prior experience, or you just kind of, okay, in your training you would teach them this when high school students came up?
No, although we did do abbreviated versions of, we had our own mock legislative process and committees, etc. Most of what I understood about the rules really was just about observing this building over the years and how the rules were applied in various settings. When I actually was elected and was sitting behind then floor leader David Perryman, that's when I really started digging in to make sure that I understood how he was using the rules. And as far as the rules, they seem arcane, but they're really broken down into kind of basic nuts and bolts. What do we do in a committee? What do we do on the floor? And then kind of leftovers.
So the rules, they change from session to session. How does that happen? And do rules get taken away? How's that process when they get in there and for each session?
Yeah. So they don't change in between each session. They change in between each legislature.
Yeah, each legislature, excuse me.
And so
every 2 years.
The rules for, we're in the second session of the 60th legislature. Those are the same rules that the members adopted at the beginning of the first regular session of the 60th legislature. Normally the process for how the amendments work is, my office, we take notes of the things that we break.
Things that seem awkward and
things that are sort of unintended, or if I get a question about a rule and I'm like, I don't know that there's a clear answer to that. Like, we're going to make our best judgment, and then we're going to make a note and try to clean it up in the next cycle. So when we get to the end of a legislature, normally after the elections, apparently members are busy around November. So we don't really have a lot of conversations about rules until afterwards. We get together and I've got a list of rule changes that I've either interacted with members about, or I've observed there's some tension here. We need to fix this. And then throughout that process, we have there's conversations with obviously members of the majority caucus, members of the minority caucus. There's at least one time where Leader Fugate, Leader Munson, and I have a conversation about, hey, any thoughts about rules for those? We compile all of those. We draft all of them, even if we get a rule that's like, this definitely isn't going in. Like, we will draft it. We will include the exact language that's going to get changed. And then there's a committee that's organized by the speaker or speaker-elect, depending on the cycle, that reviews those and ultimately gets those drafted into what becomes the House resolution that gets presented on organizational day. And even some of those depends on the year and the timing. Those we try to get all of the rules out and a fully comprehensive memo about all of the rule changes out the week before. And one of the things that my team and I spend a lot of time on is once we've got that final resolution, going through, looking at every single change and providing that memo to the members elect at that point of here's what you're going to be voting on. Here's the changes that are the same. Here's the rules that are going to be the same. Here's the things that are going to be different. And is it a substantive change? Is it a technical change? But we want to be very clear about what is being adjusted. That way, like Leader Fugate said, that first vote you cast as a member is for speaker. That second vote is for speaker pro tem, and that third vote is on the rules that we just dropped on you, basically.
Yep.
So we try to be very transparent about what the rules are and what those changes are going to be.
And I think, if my recollection is correct, that's something that you really did for the first time when I was elected as a freshman. I don't recall receiving a good synopsis of the changes that came along, but it may have been 2 years in, so it may have been in 2020 where you took the time to outline, here's everything that's changed and what you should be looking for, and that's been the practice ever since.
Mm-hmm.
I want to highlight for the two of you something that CJ and I worked on, because CJ does come and ask, not just me, but all members, what are you interested in changing in the rules? But we have over the years expanded the use of floor substitutes. Before, it used to be very narrow, and there are two specific changes as a result of that. One of which is we now have additional ways we can change language that has been adopted in a floor substitute. The rules on its surface say that if language is amended and approved by the body, it can't be further amended. And that's to keep us from backtracking, etc. Well, if I adopt a floor substitute, I've changed every single word. Now what do I do if I need to do something else with that? Do I have to undo the adoption of that amendment? And so CJ worked to get us some flexibility, some latitude in that area. The other was the reality that we were getting floor substitutes without any information about what the substitute did. And so we adopted a rule that said, if you're going to present a floor substitute, it has to have a summary of what's contained. So,
and one of the things along those lines is, when we hear the term floor substitutes, lots of the time the thought is like, oh, we're changing everything in the bill. The vast majority of those that we do are a bunch of little changes. Like, we're not really, most of the time, not every time, most of the time, gutting a bill on the floor and replacing it with something else. The alternative would be we've got to do 5 or 6 individual amendments, and
or one amendment that says change and to or and or.
Right, and ultimately, I know the term substitutes has sort of a negative connotation sometimes. I think it's more transparent the way that we do it. With the how we do those substitutes, because one, you do have to have the summary, which you don't have to have on the other.
That's true.
The other amendments, but you're also voting on one thing as opposed to 5, 6, 7 things. And sort of the bigger procedural challenge is, what if we miss one of those amendments? What if we forget to take up, Amendment 4, and we send it over to the Senate, and now the bill is flawed, and we've got to fix it somewhere else. So it allows us to be more sort of comprehensive in getting the changes that any member needs to ultimately get the bill in whatever form the members need it to be in.
How often are you challenged and you don't know that the challenge is coming with Parliament, with the rules, and how often do most people give you a heads up?
I will say, so at Leader Fugate knows this, I spend a lot of time trying to build trust with members. When it comes to the training that we do at the beginning of session, the new member orientation, I spend a lot of time trying to build trust with members, because if there's a problem, I'd rather be proactive about it than sort of reactive on the floor. And part of that's just we want the floor to run well. If we can fix issues before they're issues, that's great. Sometimes procedural issues are also political issues. and I'm
remember a few last year.
I'm aware of this. So I know this, but I will say probably 90 to 95% of the time when there's an issue, I've had a conversation with that member in advance.
Yeah.
To sort of if we can work it out in advance or not. And sometimes that's, as Leader Fugate said, sometimes that's a 12:30 at night text between the two of us. I already told you I didn't sleep well. So, of, hey, what's this bill with this rule? And we'll take a look at that. And almost every time we fix that before it comes up.
I'm thinking of one specific instance where I think the body was surprised when I raised an issue, and the speaker said, the point is well taken, because I had advised CJ.
And ultimately, and I'm a big fan of saying that, even though, my team writes the rules, like we literally put the document together, the members vote on them.
Yeah.
I mean, they're ultimately the members' rules, and it's part of my job to help sort of, facilitate their enforcement. Ultimately, y'all have to hold yourselves accountable. I will say one thing. You asked earlier, and I forgot to answer part of your question of, are there specific rules that were written for specific people? And the answer is yes. I have names for many of them. Most of them are not here anymore. But one of them is, in Rule 9.2, which is our rule on points of order, basically, if you're going to raise a point of order on the floor, you have to cite the rule that you believe has been breached. And I know that's frustrating sometimes. I get that. It's designed so that you must come ask me. Or when you bring it up, a point of order about such and such, we can easily all of us be on the same page about what specific rule is this a problem for. Previously, I won't disparage him much, but your predecessor, who he and I have a great relationship, former Leader Inman, he was really, really good at point of order and then giving this awesome, sounded great explanation for why we were violating the rules, except those weren't actually rules. But he was great at even me, making me be like, well, maybe that's true. Maybe we are.
He was convincing.
He's very convincing. And part of the struggle with that is now we have to spend, sometimes, a significant amount of time figuring out, is that actually a rule violation? And one of the things that is previous to me, you can go back and listen to the precedents when they were being decided, and we have the full audios of all of them.
Oh, wow.
That's interesting.
And one of Sean, the deputy parliamentarian, one of his first projects was he went through and had to edit all of those. He's still mad about this project. He went through and edited all of those audio files. So we actually just have the clips. And he would tell me on average he was cutting out 45 minutes of just dead space.
Oh, wow.
As they were,
where the point of order would come up, they would stand at ease. There was this dead space coming up with the right answer. And I cannot imagine if I was like, hey, we're going to take 45 minutes and I'm going to go work this out. I mean, y'all would...
Especially during deadline.
Y'all would revolt, right?
Yeah.
The delay in getting responses to points of order is generally seconds, at most a couple of minutes, while we're trying to figure out, okay, what's the real issue here? What's the rule? Is this the right rule? So I'm not often surprised, but when I am, you have to tell me, why.
Yeah. Okay.
For those who are listening, I think it's important to note that we really have three kind of separate, distinct bodies of rules. So we have house rules, then we have joint rules that are agreed upon later, but that's the rules that we in the Senate together, when we're working on things, deal with. And then there's precedent, which aren't technically rules, but they're interpretations of how the rules have been applied in the past, so that we don't do things one way and then turn around and do something arbitrarily different.
Yeah, and that's a great point. The precedent, our precedents anyway, started being developed, pretty much after 2005, and we have in our book, that's our abbreviated version with the coil bound. Our full rule book is, it's a perfect bound. It's 600 pages. Most members don't want to carry that with them to committee, and I get that. So we started doing the coil bound because that's more useful for most members. But we do have the full versions, and all of the versions are online. The full rules, all the precedents are all on the website, all on the public website. So anybody can go and look at those.
Publications tab on OKHouse.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Those are all there. But I'm a big believer that although I already told you I was a lawyer, I'm not great at math. I'm a big believer, at least in the case of rules, of showing our work.
Yeah.
And this is where, when we make decisions, when we make rulings, that are substantive, that are, sort of changing what we do, we write them down and we publish them.
Stories are important. That added bit, tells you a little bit more, which I think is great.
Yeah, you can see right there reference to the House precedent. And then the precedents book itself has all of the kind of substantive information around how that precedent was set.
Well, tell us, Andy, what was a point that, in your career here that, rules, there's some story that you can tell us about that the rules sort of helped, change or not even dramatically, but something that you remember that it was so good that you were on top of the rules and you could help further something? There's many. I'm just telling you that it's sitting next to you on the floor. We've shared a desk now this will be their fourth year, but people from across the aisle come and ask you questions about rules, and it doesn't matter who you are. We're all members, and
Right.
you give them the same help that you would give one of us. But if there's something that you remember, something sticks out that you've done, or even you, I know that when you go up to the dais, it's always a good conversation. But we all know that we're going to stand at ease for a little bit. But even your relationship, because you go up there quite a bit. So, is there anything that sticks out?
There's nothing that jumps out to me. I mean, I try to make sure I understand the rules so that as best we can, we're following the rules and following the process because they're there ostensibly to help all of us. I mean, I make the joke on a regular basis, make CJ cringe every time, that the rules exist to constrain the minority. And I heard a great response earlier today. I don't remember which one of you said that, but which minority are we talking about here? Because we have so many factions on the floor. But I can't think of any. I have a good relationship with CJ, and when I walk up and I have a question about something, most of the time it's not a problem. There are specific times when we're not allowed to approach in the middle of a vote, for instance, and I get the hand. The more we know and understand the rules, the more effective I think we can be in advocating for our own stuff and making sure that it's heard and presented well. So,
How about you?
Well, I don't know if there's a specific situation, but I agree with Leader Fugate. I think part of what makes the floor works better now than it ever has been. I think we're consistently getting better at floor management and respect and rules enforcement and following those. I think we get significantly better at that every session. But one of the things that I think is helpful is, Leader Fugate knows this. If he comes to me with a problem or a question, the only person who I might discuss that with is somebody in my office.
Yeah.
I'm not, if he comes to me with like, hey, I'm planning on doing this on the floor, like, this is my strategy, he knows I'm not turning around and telling the speaker's office. Now, when that comes up, there will be a script or a prompt or a response ready, but that will also be a surprise to the presiding officer. They won't know that those things are coming. And it's not because, I treat basically every relationship as an individual client. Each of you have, I treat every conversation we have, confidential, sort of that privilege of, you come to me with a question, I'm going to give you the best answer. It's going to be the same answer I give anybody, regardless of what part of your leadership or something like that. You're going to get that same response. And what most people don't realize is the person I tell, at least historically, I'll use the 59th legislature as an example, the person I got told no the most was the floor leader. I think Leader Eccles would tell you, the person who told him no more often than not was me. We can't do it that way. Now, I'm not a no guy. That's not, it's hard to keep your job for 9 years if you're a no guy. I'm a yes if. Yeah, we can, tell me what your outcome is.
here's how.
Here's how. And sometimes it's, you got to get 68 votes to suspend the rule. Sometimes it's, you got to wait 3 days to overcome constitutional hurdle. I will help you try to accomplish your purpose if you tell me what it is. But you might not always like the answer because it might take a little bit more time or work or process than maybe we would want.
So, well, thank you all so much for this. I know that at the end of our, may not know, but at the end of our podcast, we always end with questions for the Ellens. And so, do you have questions for us?
I have a question.
Okay.
Do you have one?
I got a heads up about the question.
I forgot to tell you. I apologize.
So I've been thinking about this for a couple of days.
Oh, okay.
So my question is, so we're talking about rules, we're talking about procedure. And I realize, like, I am not a normal person when it comes to rules and parliamentary procedure. Like, I know that.
Know thyself, yeah.
So from your perspectives, coming in, and even for Leader Fugate, like, he is more in my bucket of type of people on rules than other people's bucket. So for people who aren't inherently rules or process people, what's sort of the most challenging thing as y'all came in that you interacted with the rules or a process or how we do things? Because we can be sometimes inflexible. That's by design, obviously. But what's been the biggest challenge with your interactions with the rules or the process?
It's more artfully articulated than what I was thinking in my head. It's very similar.
I think, well, I find just I think the hardest process for me, well, twofold. One is in committees, I wish there was public comment, and I know that it's a part of the rules, but figuring out a way to bring more public comment to our committee process. But two, probably the challenge I get is the debates that they have to go in order of time in office that we have to. And that one, I struggle with that one. Maybe that's because I'm a new member and we were always up first, and so I struggled with being ready off the go.
You're kind of saying maybe the finisher of the debate might not be the one who's been there the longest.
Yes. So
okay, very helpful.
Yeah,
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, you know that I have a challenge with with some rules. One is that when changes are made on the fly, you can't do that when you're in a joint session. I forgot to alert CJ when people were going to be on the floor and present. I didn't know some of those layers of rules, and so now I know definitely that while we're in a joint session, especially who can be on the floor, there has to be special permission, or they can't be on the floor. And when I was coming from a place of working an agenda, and when someone wasn't there and didn't know it, and kind of upset the parliamentarian's office a little bit, but we made up since then. And I do believe in forgiveness, so hope you do too when you break a rule. But it was something that I definitely have heard. I probably broke several rules, not on purpose. Wearing a hat on the floor, forget.
Yeah.
And then I voted in a hat, and then I had to re-vote without. I mean, there are some things that, especially with all the activity that's up here, it's kind of sometimes easy to forget, and it's not good for me to know that I'm a rule breaker. But I always again ask for forgiveness, and we've moved on. So.
Well, I love that. Thank you both. I mean, and one of the things I think all of House staff is here to do, myself and my office included, is to be good reminders. Like, we're, none of us try to be the bad guy, though. If somebody's going to be a bad guy, it's always going to be me. Just a reminder. We try very, very hard to not do anything on the microphones. Because like you said, Representative Hefner, for the members that are coming up here, unless you've just determined, like, the rules are going to be my thing,
I got roped into this.
You're good at it.
Unless that's what and not that, people who aren't interested in rules don't have policy areas as well. But that's just a layer of complexity that, we want you to come ask.
Yeah.
We don't expect nobody's an expert on everything. And so, for the House staff that do the process.
Respectfully, I'll disagree with that. On day one, all of us are experts on everything now in the legislature.
Just because you have to.
It depends on who you are with that idea.
Yeah.
And so, all of us on House staff, are just here to help.
Right.
And what most members don't see behind the scenes is, every time I talk to a member about, hey, this is awkward, but let's talk about these rules. It's, there's 10 times where we didn't do that, or there's members who have come up to us and said, well, did you see so-and-so? I always sort of joke that last week, which was the first week of session, I always joke it's the first week of school. We have members routinely, both sides of the aisle, both parts of the building, come up and say, oh, hey, did you know that y'all broke this rule? We have to sort of figure out what's the best way to handle that while protecting our rules and our process, but also protecting our members.
Yeah.
So, but thank you both for that.
I'm not saying that you have chewing tobacco, but unless you're planning to also drink out of that cup, maybe you should take your habit off.
I have no comment.
So my question was going to be, and you did articulate it so much more effectively but basically it's the magic wand. If you had one wand, you could wave and just change something about what we do. And I will just respond with my own change, and it goes back to the Senate. The one thing the Senate does that I really value is their opportunity to get back into the queue in debate for a second round to effectively rebuttal, and it would be wonderful. And I realize we can't just do that because we have timed limits, but maybe an opportunity to reserve a couple of minutes of a debate, and
Yeah.
For a member that would.
I'd love 5 minutes of prep time as a caucus to really hammer out what we're going to talk about and who goes first and all of that kind of stuff.
We get a little bit of that while they're trying to sort out who's going to speak in which order, but to your point, that maybe there's something else. The challenge is we have so many bills that we're taking a look at, and I don't, that's me shooting from the hip. But there are times I wished, man, if I had a chance to reserve 2 minutes of my time to just jump back in and say something. So.
How
You're
about
wrong.
you? What's your magic wand?
No, mine is, and I've never talked to you about it, but just committee structure, how we can make public comment a standard part of the committee process.
Yeah.
Magic wand on the floor or magic wand with rules?
Change something about our process.
I think that the budget has always been something that I've loved and follow, and this is, I think that I think there should be a member of the minority a part of budget conversations. And I know that that's one thing that, I love that Trey Caldwell has time, Chairman Caldwell has time that we can talk and discuss. He gives us open office hours. I believe that especially to hear representatives talk about why they want their bill in that small amount of time with his staff in there is great to give feedback. So that might be my magic wand, because I think when it comes to budget on the floor, I think that it would be a better understanding. We get the budget afterwards. It's all decided. I think that there should be, and that's always why, oh my gosh, I can't believe. If there's a little bit of heads up, we definitely could understand and talk about it a little bit differently. And I think it just makes us a better team for the state. So,
I mean, based off of past years, I think the governor would agree, since he's oftentimes the minority who's left out of the budget process.
I think that it's all parts. So it didn't necessarily have to do with rules, but I think that it's a part of the process. And I think it would be better conversations that we'd have if we had more information on it. So. Well, this has been great. I've
thank you
loved
for joining us between two Ellens.
Yes, thank you. And I hope to look into the rules a little bit more and not break them as much. So there we go. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.